Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Audrey Lewis, Marketing Specialist at Tealium, and I'll be your moderator. Before we get started, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes with time for Q&A at the end and will also be recorded. For any questions we aren't able to answer live, we'll follow up with you after. Next, we have some related resources available for you in the attachments section of the platform, so please feel free to engage with them at any point. Lastly, this is the third webinar in our Summer Partner Webinar series, where we're showcasing powerful use cases only achievable with Tealium and our amazing partners. You can watch the on-demand sessions of our previous webinars with Amazon Web Services and Braze using the links in the attachments. Now on to today's presenters. Namrata is the global product lead for conversion measurement at Google, specifically focused on commercialization of privacy-safe technologies to build a robust conversion measurement infrastructure in a post-cookie world. Jake is the Director of Product Marketing at Tealium and has spent the majority of his career working for enterprise technology brands in all aspects of branding, digital marketing, and web analytics. And with that, let's get started. Jake, over to you.
Thank you, Audrey. So before I pass it off to Namrata, as Audrey said, we will be going through Q&A here at the end. So any questions that you have for us on any of the content today, we'd love to take them at the end and be able to do some questions live. Here's the agenda for today. We're hoping to get through this in about 45 minutes, 30-ish minutes to 45 minutes. There's a little bit of variation there, but I'm going to have, and we've got, as Audrey said, our wonderful partner Google here to talk about the evolving ads ecosystem and kind of who better to talk about advertising and what's going on in digital advertising than Google and their path to privacy-centric measurement. We're going to talk a little bit about a new feature of Google Ads called Google Enhanced Conversions API, and Namrata will take us through that. And then I'll start to do a little bit of level setting and talk about the Tealium and Google story, both on the Google Ads side, which we'll talk a lot about today, as well as some other platforms like Analytics and Google Cloud there towards the end. And then, as I said, we'll take Q&A. So that's the plan for the day, and I'll get us started into the good stuff with Namrata. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here with Tealium. And as Jake mentioned, I will be covering broadly two things. One, just talk about the changing ads ecosystem altogether and what our strategy as Google is to navigate the system. And then I'm going to go and talk a little bit about our super new exciting feature called Enhanced Conversions that is going to be very critical in us navigating this new measurement infrastructure. So before I get started with that, I wanted to ground us in this slide where we're talking about, where we explain why conversions are important. So obviously, you know, every performance marketer and every advertiser that we work with cares about conversions. But when we talk about conversions, it's very important to understand that conversions and conversion reporting from observed and model conversions alone is not the end-to-end story of the impact of conversions and impact of accurate conversion measurement. Conversion measurement impacts everything downstream, starting with attribution, incrementality, smart bidding, targeting automation, creative automation. So all of these downstream activities and products at Google that you use conversion data. And the efficacy of all of these downstream things really depends on how well you are measuring your conversions. All of these downstream things ultimately lead to your ad performance, and the revenue that you get from our media. So it is extremely essential for us to have right conversion and accurate and comprehensive conversion measurement for you to be able to get performance and revenue from Google. So now that we've talked about the importance of conversion measurement altogether, I want to talk a little bit about why and what is changing. So historically, we've lived in a world of fully observable data from cookies. Rooted in user privacy and rising expectations for user privacy, we are seeing a lot of different factors impacting the measurement ecosystem. Um, the two biggest categories of these changes are overall platform changes like Apple's ITP, mobile OS restrictions. All of these cause restrictions on using like third-party cookies and device identifiers to uphold user privacy. Secondly, there are also regulations, especially in this exists today, more so in EEA, but we're also seeing it come to Americas and other parts of the world, is increased regulation on the use of personal data and requirements around user consent. So all of these changes have really impacted the world as we knew it for measurement. And we are really moving from a world where we could observe all the data to a world where we cannot. So cookies will continue to degrade, and we will have to move to a world of anonymized and aggregated measurement. Unfortunately, in this new world, there really won't be a single silver bullet for measurement that will replace cookies. And what's going to happen is we're going to have to lean on several solutions to kind of get us the data that cookies once provided us. It also means that we are going to have to improve and increase our reliance on conversion modeling wherever we are not able to observe these several data points as we used to be able to. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we plan to manage this change on the Google side. So broadly, the change management that we're doing, as we're moving from cookies to a more anonymized and aggregated measurement, we're focusing on three strategic pillars. The first pillar is preserve. And this pillar revolves around just having overall durable tagging. So as we know, cookies, we're going through the shift of like cookies to other more anonymized forms of measurement, but this change really is not going to happen overnight. And we're going to have to lean on cookies and tagging in the near term. And even in the future, as we move away from cookies, we're still going to have to lean on partial cookie-based data and other forms of data to inform like the total holistic comprehensive infrastructure. So it's again important that it's easy to get carried away in all the new cool features that we're introducing to somehow like fill the gaps in measurement, but the baseline is still going to need to be rooted in durable tagging. So the preserve pillar really revolves around that. The second pillar, which is inform, is where most of our future proofing efforts are focused. This pillar revolves around filling gaps in observable data. So whatever we are not able to observe, we want to be able to model. But for us to be able to model, we really need signals from you to give us those signals so we can model accurately. Today's product, Enhanced Conversions, is one of those products that really falls in this pillar and helps improve our overall quality of modeling. We will talk more about that in a bit. And then the third pillar, secure, is really the next gen solutions that we are building that will help us reimagine the measurement infrastructure, several years from now. You might have heard of solutions for building that fall into this pillar, like the Privacy Sandbox, but it's also important to understand that all of these new inventive solutions are in very, very early stages of ideation and development. And when these are built, these and cookie-based measurement will coexist for quite some time before we can fully go to a cookieless world. So while there's so much change happening, and while we don't fully know what the future holds for us, we do know certain things that are going to be true about this future. We have categorized these into three big themes. The first is that the future is going to be consented. I touched briefly upon this before, but with this rising need for transparency and control, consent banners, which are now prevalent primarily in the European Economic Area and UK, are going to become more and more prevalent across different regions. And the importance of tools that help our tags buyer in a consent-aware manner are just going to continue to increase. The second, which I've spent a lot of time already talking about today, is that the future is going to be cookieless. Cookies will continue to degrade, and we will need to lean more on aggregated and anonymized forms of measurement. And finally, our reliance on model data and conversion modeling will continue to increase as observable data from cookies continues to decrease. All right, so now that we've set the stage for what is changing in this ecosystem, I want to talk today about enhanced conversions and the partnership that we have with Tealium on this really exciting product. So enhanced conversions as a product, most simplistically put, enables you to augment your first-party data by using hashed PII. How this works is that a user signs into Google and let's say views an ad on YouTube. The user then goes and converts on the website. The conversion tag captures the field you specify through this product. And usually we have multiple match fields, but most commonly it's an email address, but it could also be a phone number or a mailing address, and hashes this data, and then sends this hashed data securely to Google. And then we match this data against Google signed in data to report a conversion. So it's almost like I said, it's a product that helps append first-party data, but it also overall improves and makes conversion measurement more accurate, because a lot of these conversions we never captured before, and it's a new data source altogether that we are using to improve your overall measurement. I want to talk a little bit more in detail on how enhanced conversions helps end-to-end. So first and foremost, a lot of these conversions that we are measuring through enhanced conversions, they come from recovered conversions due to browser and regulatory changes. A lot of ad-click interactions that were lost because of deprecation of third-party cookies in several different platforms is something enhanced conversions is able to pick up, especially when it's cross-device. And then, like I mentioned previously, since this is a completely new first-party data source, we're also able to observe net new conversions from this additional first-party data. Both of these recovered plus net new observed conversions goes into our overall conversion data flow and helps us validate overall conversion measurements, and improves our overall conversion modeling to provide as accurate and as comprehensive of a view of the overall conversion reporting you should have been receiving. This data, now more rich, more accurate, more comprehensive, then helps improve bidding and attribution and everything else downstream, which then leads to overall improved performance. So this is really how end-to-end enhanced conversions not only helps make your conversion reporting more accurate, but also helps you get much better performance out of your data. And talking about performance, enhanced conversions has so far, from the few advertisers that we have on this today, because it's still very much an early stage product, we are seeing fantastic performance uplift results. On search, we are seeing an uplift of a 5% median increase in reported conversion rates. And on YouTube, we are seeing a 12% median increase in reported conversion rates. So with that, I want to pass it over to Jake to talk a little bit more about how we're partnering with Tealium to make it much easier for Tealium advertisers to take advantage of enhanced conversions. This product is available outside of Tealium as well. But if you are a Tealium advertiser, it is a key benefit that we provide, and making your implementation of enhanced conversions much simpler through Tealium. So with that, I will hand it over to Jake.
Thanks, Namrata. Thank you so much for the overview on how Google sees the advertising ecosystem and a little bit of an insight into enhanced conversions, which is super exciting. I want to, before we move forward, just kind of touch on some things that I want to reiterate and I thought were important as a part of what Namrata covered from a Google side on really what are the tactics and strategies as Namrata mentioned that change is the only constant. And I think that's always been true in digital marketing and advertising, but very much especially true right now as we're going through this period of change with third-party cookies on the way out and user privacy expectations rising. There's a little bit of a new idea of how do I do marketing now, and how do I make sure that I can preserve some of the things that I'm doing now while leveraging other resources or other data points to make sure that I'm continuing to measure my advertising accurately and optimize my advertising accurately. So a couple of things that she mentioned. One was this idea of preservation of what exists and this transition that we're in now. There's a article upon article talking about first-party data being a great option, and we believe in that. These first-party data sets are not built overnight. And so there will be some time that's needed for advertisers to build up enough first-party data and test those first-party data strategies and advertising methods to really be sure and feel confident moving into this world without third-party cookies. And so our recommendation around that is to start now, take the time. These aren't built overnight. And so start doing that now. The other one was informing. So augmenting gaps as browsers change, as regulations change, as collection just ultimately becomes a little harder, making sure that you can look deeper into the customer journey and be able to leverage and observe more conversions in order to better model how your advertising is done is going to be super important. And we're going to talk about that as well. And the last one is security. Namrata mentioned a little bit about consent and privacy. User expectations around privacy are probably at their most highest at this point in the market. And so the way in which you treat that handoff of consent and the way in which you inform your users on your own digital properties of how you're going to collect information about them, what information you're collecting, how you're going to use that is going to become super important. And the way that you govern that data and send the data that Google needs or Facebook needs or other advertisers downstream need in order to be able to go through and leverage these types of models or leverage these types of data points in advertising is going to be really important as well. So I thought three really, really good points to keep in mind as we move forward here. At the very end, Namrata mentioned first-party data strategies, and we talked a lot about that in the market, and there's article upon article about first-party data strategies, but let's talk a little bit more about how this impact of third-party cookies going away and this idea of data deprecation can impact both advertising, which Namrata talked in detail about, but also things like analytics and personalization. So this idea of data deprecation is a combination of a lot of factors. It's privacy, it's third-party cookie loss, it's global regulation. It's this idea of many different shifts around user privacy impacting the way that businesses understand and action and engage the customers on their digital properties and through advertising platforms and analytics platforms like Google Ads and Google Analytics. And so I thought it was really kind of a good point to stop here and walk through some of this, because we often talk about this idea of third-party cookies going away and how it impacts advertising, but analytics and experiences can also be pretty impacted by this. And so let's start with advertising. Namrata mentioned a lot of the kind of high-level overview that we also see in advertising, but with third-party cookies going away and user privacy expectations rising, really that kind of bread and butter ability to target customers and prospects and build lookalike pools is significantly diminished as performance data to drive optimizations starts to decrease. And so even think about use cases that are kind of what I would call the no-brainer use cases, that I'm building my marketing strategy. And of course, these are things that I'm going to do use cases like prospect targeting and site retargeting, lookalike targeting, suspect targeting. All of those are going to need to be augmented with some additional data in order to be able to get back to either measuring these campaigns or just improving the scalability of these campaigns. If we look at analytics, being able to, and Namrata mentioned this as well, measure how those activities are going. I'm doing prospect targeting, I'm doing site retargeting. is it working? Are are people converting? Are we turning this into actual business results? So think about use cases there in analytics like media measurement and attribution. That's the big subject of today, but also things like audience analysis and lifetime value analysis that will start to be a little bit more foggy without the right approach and the right methodologies. And then lastly, experiences. The ability to recognize, remember, and recommend is dramatically decreased without third-party cookies. And simple things like site personalization can get a lot harder. Controlled A/B experimentation, and even small things like persistent state login is going to be a little bit of a bump in customer experience. And so really think about the advertising portion of this for sure, but also analytics and experiences. All of these can be impacted by this idea of data deprecation that we've talked about today. So what's the way forward? There's many options. Not all of them are equal, I would say. The first option is probably, I would say, the option that we see the least amount of people going for is we say, hey, things are changing. We can't do this nice one-to-one personalization anymore. It's getting a little bit more difficult. We're going to go ahead and give up. We're going to go buy advertising direct, or put up billboards around and hope that those work, or really invest super a lot of our budget into things like contextual. That is certainly an option, but not necessarily your best option. Certainly you don't need to forego data and information about your customers altogether in order to be successful or kind of maintain and move forward with advertising in this world that Namrata has kind of painted a picture of here in the future. The other one is saying, hey, I'm going to continue to try and find workarounds. I'm going to hack my way into user IDs. I'm going to continue to kind of play cat and mouse with these browser changes and try and keep pace. I think what we've seen from a lot of the industry is that as soon as a workaround, quote unquote workaround, is found for maintaining some of the status quo in which we've all been used to saying, we can get the data that we need, we can power the advertising with that data. As soon as those workarounds are found, the workarounds are quickly mitigated for more privacy-centric options. And so really thinking about, what is the long tail way forward, and it's probably the most sure thing going forward into this kind of new advertising world that we've talked about is I'm going to really start to focus on first-party data. I'm going to really start to think about what data I know, what audiences I know, who I have a relationship with, and start to manage my media around these three different audiences, these known, opted in, engaged audiences, maybe my unknown audiences, and then going through into those who are not really wanting to have a full engaged relationship with me or some sort of transactional relationship, but I'm going to need data in order to do that. And so really starting to build a foundational customer data pipeline for your business that's real-time and channel independent. I can work with multiple vendors across my business and it's trusted. Being able to start to think about collecting every first-party interaction with consent. And that's something that Namrata mentioned as one of those key pillars of the future going forward is consent is going to be super important. It's going to be on the ownership likely of the brand in order to get that consent to use that data in the way that we need to use it in order to create these experiences. And then being able to rely on more accurate data as well. I'm a former performance marketer myself and growth marketer. Third-party cookies are great. They're easy, but they aren't always the most accurate. And I think we all know that. And so as we transition into first-party data for more privacy-centric options, those are going to be also more accurate data points that I can rely on as a marketer to go and do my business. And then ultimately, finally, after I've collected all these building blocks and gotten consent and started to build up my first party assets, being able to integrate that data with marketing and analytics tools across Google platforms and other tech that might be at your company that powers customer engagement and insight to deliver customer first experiences. So we really think that's the way forward. And even Gartner has started to talk about this idea of how do I collect first party data? It's gotten a little bit harder and it's gotten a little bit more of the onus on me as a brand to go and have those interactions with my customer. I'm going to need some strategy here, right? It's not necessarily a set it and forget it motion anymore. And so Gartner has started talking about server to server connections as a way to capture what Namrata was talking about in measurement data and allowing for data collected using first-party cookies to then be shared with specific partners. downstream, like Google advertising. And so server to server API based methods to, as Namrata kind of said, augment some of the gaps in data that we're seeing through the deprecation of third-party cookies is going to be a key piece in you getting back to being able to measure and model conversions and be able to optimize advertising ultimately. So let's talk about that. Namrata mentioned Google Enhanced Conversions as a new feature that we have partnered with Google on. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that works and how that can help you stay agile. So what does that server to server method look like, and how do we work with Google Enhanced Conversion? So this is kind of our traditional data flow that we're all kind of used to. A consumer comes in, they hit a digital property. In this case, it's a website. Some tags fire. The web browser sends some of that information that's been collected off to some advertising, and then we have our information in our advertising tool. As Namrata mentioned, as some of the deprecation of third-party cookies comes along, more consent is needed in order to be, more consent is needed for that data to be collected. We're going to need some other methodologies in order to make sure that the data that we can capture is accurately captured, and we aren't limited by any sort of, regulatory or browser changes that might impact the way that we collect data with consent. And so this server-side connection is going to allow us to collect in two places and be able to make sure that as much accurate data can be sent to Google Ads, that it as is consented and as is possible. And we also talked a little bit about additional sources as well. So this API-based method is going to allow me to collect more information about the customer journey than just what's going on my website, to be able to inform what things that I'm seeing and what conversions that I'm measuring in Google Ads. And so really that's the idea of what that looks like. And obviously Google is powering almost every single business out there from an analytics perspective and from an advertising perspective. But the ecosystem of technologies in any given business is rarely one single platform. And so whatever tool and technology that your company relies on, that is going to allow you to power advertising like Google Ads, analytics, CRM, anything that you really have. We have a ton of integrations in our marketplace. Google has many of them to go through and get more of this first-party data collection into your customer engagement and insight tools as possible. So let's talk about server-side advantages. I'm going to invest into this, or I'm going to look into it. What's the benefit for me? And Namrata mentioned some on kind of the advertising portion, but there's a couple others simply from a data management perspective that we see. First and foremost is full funnel visibility. So I mentioned those additional data sources that just aren't going to come up or be leveraged in a web transaction, more easily available downstream to advertisers and analytics. Being able to track outcomes across multiple channels lower in the purchase path is going to start to become very important. As Namrata mentioned, we need to augment some of those gaps in data through additional data sources to enable comprehensive modeling in products and features like Google Enhanced Conversions. So the fact is that I'm going to need to be a little bit more thoughtful about what pieces of data I'm taking from the customer journey in order to be able to better model conversions and measurement in my advertising. The second one is super important. Namrata mentioned security as a key pillar and governance. Strengthen data sharing. So really being able to create a central source of control and say, what data am I collecting? What data needs to be mapped over to Google in order for them to do what they need to do and on the enhanced conversion side and in Google Ads? And then really start to think about also reducing the impact of data drop-off due to technical issues in the browser. And then the third is data control, kind of what I mentioned previously, is being able to better manage data shared and when you share it. That governance and privacy piece, obviously consent is going to be highly important, and what data is mapped over to these downstream providers, that gives you a better opportunity to control what is sent downstream and put some governance in place. And then what's the opportunity? So we've certainly had many of our customers start to test these methodologies with advertising providers, both with Google and others. And we've seen some big benefits from taking this approach to client-side and server-side collection and distribution, especially for downstream advertising. And some of the benefits that we've seen or that our clients have seen are first and foremost, and we mentioned this at the outset, improved event coverage or observability of what's going on across the customer journey, and being able to measure that in my advertising platform. So things, and we kind of saw that in the data flow diagram, events not covered by the pixel in the browser, being able to measure things that aren't necessarily covered by the pixel and be able to model conversions based off those. One of our large streaming clients saw this benefit at about a 7% increase in the amount of conversion events that they were able to see and capture in their advertising. Improved targeting of their advertisements. Namrata mentioned this as well. The better that we can get in terms of getting Google and other advertising platforms a better picture of first-party data and customer journey, the better that we'll be able to measure and model and then optimize targeting in the future. So one of our large travel clients, TUI Group, saw a conversion rate increase from about 29% of an API-based social media platform that they were using in a similar fashion. So a 29% conversion rate, that's a pretty good year. That's a pretty dang good quarter. And so those are some of the bigger ones of being able to better see and optimize in this world without third-party cookies, and still being able to improve that conversion rate downstream. Improved attributed conversions. Again, one of our being able to better understand how media is performing. Again, our large media streaming client saw about a 33% increase in attributed conversions. And then finally, kind of the holy grail of how we're all measured as performance marketers is improved return on ad spend. So that travel and hospitality customer saw about an 18% return on advertising spend using this server-side method to be able to bring more information to inform and measure their advertising with a large social media platform. So we talked a lot about Google Ads today, but I wanted just to take a step back here and talk about the full benefit of Google and Tealium. So while Google Ads is a major integration for a lot of Tealium advertisers, there's many, many different ways in which we integrate with the overall Google ecosystem. Think about Google Cloud, even collection sources like Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, things that your analysts might be super interested in, Google Sheets, or even just the Google Marketing Platform overall. Really, this idea of getting better data from across the customer journey and being able to get that out to these platforms like Google Cloud and Ads and Analytics is going to be super, super important in the future, where first-party data and data that is going on across your own touch points and customer journeys is really, really needed to be able to go through and continue to kind of create that virtuous cycle of customer engagement. So let's talk a little bit about the holistic picture here from just a pure event standpoint, which is what we've talked about, or just kind of things that are happening from a customer engagement standpoint on my digital properties. Really talking about the idea of bringing every customer data touch point to Google. So being able to send Google platforms, ads, analytics, cloud, information from across the customer journey, access to imported data. We talked about some of those offline sources like point of sale, loyalty, CRM, and cloud applications. Being able to ensure data is complete and trusted. Tealium is going to help with some of that pre-cleansing for usage and analysis, and being able to build insights into data with business rules to really cut down on ETL and data processing and wrangling, and then really going through and talking where we can to start to build some advanced matching. And then lastly, for the flexibility of the ways in which we integrate that data out to the Google ecosystem, being able to start to plug that data into many, many different sources with a single view of what's going on across your customer journey without a ton of coding required. Super and highly important as we start to knock down data silos and really start to focus on building this end-to-end customer data lifecycle and data supply chain. And then really thinking about, hey, my marketers and advertisers rely on Google Ads. My insights and analytics team obviously is spending a ton of time in Google Analytics and in Google Cloud. My IT team is also in Google Cloud and doing and working in things like PubSub. We want to be able to power those as well as the rest of the technology and the tech stack with a comprehensive set of trusted data. And for our advertisers, really getting into customer level data and bringing that customer level data into Google Ads, being able to then discover new audiences for Google advertising, being able to take these building blocks that we've collected, turn them into customer profiles and audiences with a customer data platform, and then send those audiences out to Google Ads in real time, super key. improve attribution and optimize marketing spend. We talked a lot about that today, but from an audience standpoint, as much information as we can get over to these ad platforms in terms of what audiences do I have, first party audiences do I have on my end? What types of information can I send to build lookalike modeling off of? That's going to be highly important. And then obviously the same concept applies, integrate with the rest of your stack, being able to not only send these events going on, but also these audiences that I'm creating out to analysis and insights tools like Google Analytics or Google Cloud, as well as Google Advertising. So at the end here, and we'll dive into some questions here, key takeaways and summary. I think Namrata covered some really, really good points that I wanted to just kind of pause and highlight on. As we've seen rising user expectations on privacy, it's impacted the way that the ecosystem measures conversions. And it's going to take a little bit of thought and planning and process to be able to continue to maintain in a privacy-centric way the way in which we measure going forward and the way that we get information and collect data about our customers. The future is consented, cookieless, and modeled. I really like those three thinking forward, and it's going to take some transition to get there. And so the time to start preparing for that date, the destination has kind of been set. Either the browsers that I'm working with right now are already there, or the browsers that I'm most interested in and where I'm collecting data now are going to get to this very first party driven model. And so really thinking about getting there or starting that journey today is going to bring you the benefit of when that time eventually comes. From a Tealium side, we're really focused in this new world on helping companies collect, organize, and activate their first-party customer data in order to deliver great customer experiences. One of those key ones that Namrata and I talked about is the Google Enhanced Conversions API. We connect and integrate directly into that with EventStream so that clients and our kind of joint clients and advertisers can benefit from a more reliable and secure way of sharing data and can take advantage of all the other integrations in Tealium's marketplace. A lot of tools rely on data, and the method by which those get them is going to be super, super important here in the future. So with that, I do see some questions that have come in that we want to make sure that we answer. I'm going to go ahead and end the slides here and not end the talk. Namrata, hello, how are you? So thanks so much for going through some of the presentation today. Namrata, one of the questions that came in was about any customer stories that you might have that somebody can kind of go look up and say, hey, you've mentioned some increases in return on ad spend, both from Google Ads and from YouTube. What can we do to kind of go and see another customer who's gone in and put that work in?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of success with a lot of customers. I will just say, I'll give a specific example, which is really being like our hero case. But generally speaking, the advertisers that seem to be benefiting most from this are the ones that have deeper conversions. So purchases, signups, as you would expect with first party data in general, that those are the types of customers that have been benefiting the most. One of our best case successes is actually from ASOS, and we just did a think with Google piece on them, just highlighting their overall success. They saw huge ROAS uplifts on both search and on search and YouTube, and I would just love for everyone to read the Think with Google piece, which has all the details on the strategies that they deployed to get the success that they did. What we could do is probably follow up with the link of that Think with Google piece. Does that sound
awesome?
Good?
Yes, and in the links and attachments, it probably isn't there now, but we will get it there for the on-demand. So when Bright Talk emails everybody who's here today and says, hey, here's all of the resources from that webinar, that blog should be there. I also got there for a quick Google search, just typing in ASOS and Google Enhanced Conversion. So easy enough to get there yourself as well. Thanks, Namrata. This is for Tealium, and so I'll go ahead and take a swing at this. Does Google Enhanced Conversions also require us to run a tag alongside this API, this server-to-server connections? Will results vary if we move completely server-to-server for this particular integration? So the best practices, as I mentioned and as Namrata mentioned, is in this transition, preserving what we already have and kind of making this transition over time to go through and make sure that we have the ability to capture what we can today and augment what we can capture today in order to better model all the kind of conversions going on that we may have missed due to technical limitations or data drop off. And so yes, the best practice right now is to run tagging alongside this API in order to get to some of the return on advertising metrics that we are hoping to, or that we've kind of talked through today. Let's move into a question for Namrata. And one of the things that we mentioned, I'll just bring this up here on the Google Ads, on the how it works for Google Enhanced Conversions. I'm going to bring this slide back up. Hold on here. Hold on. Okay. So, sorry, Namrata, give me 1 second. Well, I'll just make sure that we can talk through this because we've passed this question here a little while ago. So when we walk through how Google Enhanced Conversions works, it mentioned that it uses a couple different things, and we're lagging here, so I'm going to go ahead and end the slides. It says, and Google Enhanced Conversions enables you to augment your first-party data. Google signed-in users view your ad as kind of the first touch point. What do you mean by that? What if somebody's not signed in? Where do they sign in? Can you give some more specifics on that for this particular question?
Yeah, for sure. So very directly put, we don't match data from people that are not signed in. So enhanced conversions really only is beneficial for those users that are signed in. There are a lot of reasons for this, but the biggest one is that we want to make sure that we're hashing only people that are, that have signed in, given us their permission and things like that, just for more privacy. But there are other technical issues as well. So very, very, very directly put, we only match data from signed in users. It does not benefit those that are not signed in.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And then I'm assuming that sign-in is browser level sign-in, right? When I open up Google Chrome, browser level sign-in is what you guys are looking for, just to kind of get specific. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Question for the Tealium team. So as we mentioned, we do integrate with enhanced conversions. When do we anticipate that this conversion will be available? So the integration is available today. Any Google and Tealium advertiser can go in and start to integrate with Google Enhanced Conversions. There is some setup required in terms of accepting terms and conditions on the Google Ads side, going through and setting up that integration. It is turnkey, so you will get around some coding, but there is some testing to do in order to make sure that the conversions that you're hoping to send over are being sent over and modeled and measured. And so it's actually a pretty quick onboarding process, but it's available now for Google and Tealium advertisers to start to take advantage of in our marketplace. Last question, Namrata, that we'll take here in time. The question comes from somebody who is owning the data operations for his team. So likely a Tealium user, but he's not necessarily the owner of the Google Ads account. Do you guys have like advertiser profiles, or hey, who should he or she be looking for in their organization to go through and start to speak with their advertiser to get this integration set up?
Yes. So on the Google rep side, I would say the best way to go about it would be to find who within your organization runs digital marketing. I know sometimes it's not the same team that manages data in general. So would consider reaching out to the people that run digital marketing, and usually these people in your organization should have access to the Google AdWords account. Sometimes that access is co-shared with digital agencies that you might work with. But again, the starting point would be the digital marketing team within your organization, and then going from there to identify who has access to the Google AdWords account. Somebody usually in the organization and the digital marketing team shares access either directly themselves or with the digital agency.
Yep. I would say, as a former digital marketer, look for digital advertising, look for programmatic, look for words in the title like, media management, anything that would kind of hint at advertising. They'll likely be able to either help you get into that Google Ads account and start to work with the right people to set that integration up properly or point you in the right direction. So good feedback, Namrata. We're at the 45-minute mark. That is all the questions that we're going to be able to go through and take today. I want to pull up really quickly, if it will let me here, some resources in the attachments. So if we didn't get your question today, we will follow up post-webinar. There's a few that we weren't able to get to, so I apologize, but we will be able to get back to you via email directly after this webinar. In the attachments, you will be able to go through and see on-demand links from our entire partner series, that partner webinar series that we've been running. The other one that we would suggest that you go through if you're interested in some of this ads ecosystem conversation, consent, privacy, future of advertising, where does my DMP sit in my advertising? We have a nice webinar series that we've run at Tealium called Preparing for Life Beyond the Third-Party Cookie Masterclass series. That is full of tips based on advertising, identity, privacy, and consent. If you want to dive into some of the ecosystem shifts a little deeper that Namrata touched on, that's a good one for you to go through. And then we've got plenty of information on our partnership, on how Google and Tealium are better together. So information, hey, I'm wanting to understand Tealium and Google Analytics. Give me some more Tealium and Google Cloud information. We've got all of that for you as well, since we touched quite heavily on advertising today. So that is everything. Thank you so much for attending, Namrata. Thank you so much for your time on the Google side, for coming and presenting and letting us get a little bit of a peek inside of the new Google Enhanced Conversions feature. And again, for anybody who we didn't get to in the Q&A, we'll follow up and have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me.